Welcome to a football show, Monday edition, Titans rookie minicamp edition, the Bill Callahan celebration hour. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. He is Zach Lyons. I am Braden Gall.
I'm sorry, it's not Bill Callahan. It's Brian's dad. Because until you all in the media quit associating the two and always making it about the relationship, I think we should only refer to Bill Callahan as Brian's dad because you guys are being totally weird about this.
Why are you lumping me into this group? I don't.
Because you are part of the media. You do not speak out against it, so you are part of the problem.
Oh, I've got to speak out. I need to take a stand.
Take a stand.
You
have not everything has to be about them working together as father and son, since they have done it many times before. And I understand there is a new power dynamic, but guess what? We don't have to say we don't have to include son of Bill Callahan or father.
I didn't.
I know, but we as a society can put a stop to it now. I think everybody gets. I think everybody understands. Like the sleds, even putting something, sorry, this is just bugging me, but even putting something about the sleds had to include that they were related in all these tweets. It's okay.
We really? Get it. Like Bill Callahan and Bill Callahan in comma.
Hold on, let me pull up Easton's tweet because he's the one who shoehorned that thing in there.
Bo and Derek and Lucas, welcome to the show that is completely derailed already. Brought to you by Singer's Beverages and the Kingston Group, our two great and amazing local sponsors, who I am going to talk about for at least 5 seconds here before Zach decides to go full Drake and Kendrick on all of Nashville media. You have all their cell phone numbers too. You can reach out to all these people. You can get into their DMs. You have conversations with these folks. Don't take it out on me. I said Bill Callahan celebration hour. I didn't even mention Brian, son of Bill Callahan.
Well, we got to call him Brian's dad, though. That's what I'm trying to say, is that he has to be Brian's dad now because nobody can quit talking about it.
I don't see. I guess I don't consume enough because I don't see. Zach says starting off strong. I see. Yes. We actually have fun. I stood on a football field next to football people watching football players do football things in front of football coaches, and it was genuinely fun. I had such a good time being on the field watching players do football things, a variety at a variety of quality levels. It was fantastic. Derek says more media drama, please. Yes, there you go.
I don't see the tweet. Maybe I was mistaken that it was Easton. So
hi, Jill.
Easton, if I was incorrect on that.
Jill says hi, everyone. No, listen. I think there's 3 major topics today. Number one is sort of the general. Again, I use the word vibes. I know that's a popular term. The general vibes of practice and sort of the differences that are already noticeable, at least, again, just in one practice, one day. The only time I could be out there was Friday, and it was the only time that people could see stuff going on. And so then there's sort of what did we see from the players, which is conversation number 2, and then sort of what does that mean from an expectation setting standpoint in the summertime. Okay, now, what do you have?
Very cool insight from Titans head coach Brian Callahan on these new sleds, which his father, Bill Callahan, invented. Did we need the father part?
I mean, probably not, but like,
It's like really irked me. Titans put T'Vondre Sweat's locker between Jeffrey Simmons and former Texas teammate Keandre Coburn, literally surrounding him with the right people from the start. Were they going to put his locker outside or with the wide receivers? Like, what the fuck is that? That's a stupid-ass tweet.
Mike, thank you. You're allowed to pick on Mike. I think that one's okay. You're allowed to do that. Marcus says, I agree with Zach, and someone in the media still calls him.
Yeah, that's Teresa. Oh, I shudder every time.
Okay, so this one, I'm with you on this one. I'm with you on this one because it happens in hockey more than anything else. Hockey it drives me absolutely bonkers that in hockey media, the only way you can refer to players or coaches are by their hockey nicknames. And I don't understand it. Dutchy. It's like Matt Duchene. Dutchy. We got to call him Dutchy.
Oh God, I'm so glad I don't listen to hockey media.
But they do it on on radio. Like we had when I was doing the show on 102.5, it would be like, no. I also don't call him Lavi during a press conference or an interview. Peter Laviolette. You call him fucking Peter because that is his name. Same thing with, I don't like Coach either. And people do this all the time. And I love Teresa.
I'm okay with Coach because I think that's a little bit more commonplace. I mean, that's kind of,
doesn't mean it's right.
Of course, it is kind of weird that if you called someone Mr., and that was the only way you called him. But I mean, doctor.
I mean, doctor's an official title. Coach is not necessarily an official title. Not to the person in the media. And again, He's not my fucking coach. So he is, and what it does is it creates a divide in the level of what you're trying to accomplish. I think, like, Peter Laviolette believed he was above everybody. Like, that was just that's how he felt. And so he was okay feeling like he was better than you. And that's not the way the relationship should work. The relationship should be, I am doing my job, you are doing your job. We can get along and be respectful of each other. That's it. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that. But I'm not going to revere your title of coach because you are not my coach. And I certainly am okay calling you Mike. Like, if I ever talk to Mike Vrabel, it's Mike. It's not, you don't say coach now. But hockey's the worst. It's all Callies.
I mean, if you got people calling people Dutchy,
Joey,
that's ugh.
Like, it's so
shivers down my spine.
Becky for Matthias Ekholm. Like, it's so bad. It's so bad. It's the worst in professional radio, in particular at one station who happens to cover the Preds a lot more. But anyway, all right. You asked for media beef, okay?
I like it. Stand up for what you believe in.
Derek asked for more media beef. You're right. I will, if you ever catch me, any of you listening, or Zach or anyone else, if you catch me referring to Brian Callahan as Callie in a formal setting, an interview, a conversation, a question, a press conference, anything. If you ever hear me do that, you have the right to drag me as hard as possible. Absolutely. You can do it.
Unless you're doing it if you're doing it unironically.
Right. The only time it would ever happen is if you were close enough with that person that you are in a personal off the record setting and you're like, hey, Callie, you want another beer? You know what I mean? Like, that's the only time that is acceptable, but very rarely.
And let's be honest, if you asked if you could be called that, or there's just some nicknames you just don't even acquiesce to, even if they say it's okay to use it or call them that, you just don't. It's just weird. It's weird to me.
I agree. Again, I don't know what's so difficult the person's name is Brian. call him Brian. It doesn't have to be Coach or Callie or anything. His name's Brian. You can call him by his name. That's what his name is. I guess if you want to do Mr. Callahan, I suppose that's a little weird, but like, that's an official way to say somebody's name, I suppose.
Or Bill's son. Let's just do a roundabout here and just do Bill's son, Brian's dad.
I want to see the coach's radio show. It's like Bill's son's show. The Bill Shun coaches show.
I love it. I think it's great. Okay. Brian's dad, the equipment manager for the Tennessee Titans.
All right, so I'm gonna Sinkers Beverages. Thank you for putting up with our nonsense. Kingston Group, thank you for putting up with our nonsense. We do appreciate both of you guys for supporting us. Sinkers Beverages. You can search Uber Eats for Sinkers Beverages, and they will deliver all the booze you need directly to your house, Zach.
Hey, they'll drive so you can drink.
That is absolutely correct. They got all kinds of great selection, huge walk-in beer fridge, the big giant cooler in there. You can pick up anything you want. Their sister store, Bluegrass, serving the Hendersonville market for over 50 years. So make sure you check out Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville, and make sure you check out, if you need anything at all, any questions, any construction, anything at all you need for your home, make sure you contact the folks over at the Kingston Group. BuildKG.com is the website. If you want some more today, so make sure you check that out. And, of course, football and other F words across all podcast applications. Okay, so I want to go through sort of the differences that I noticed in practice, kind of like just bullet by bullet, and you can kind of react to them as we go. And the first one was, I was standing there talking to some folks inside the organization watching stretching. And stretching seems like a stupid thing to observe, but I think you've been talking a lot about for a long time, sort of progressing the organization forward into the 21st century from a modernization standpoint. And I was talking with somebody who's been in the organization a very, very long time. And I was like, do you like this guy, Zach Woodfin, is leading stretching in a very concerted, direct, and loud yelling, sort of very specific way. There's 2 or 3 other people out there working with all the different lines of players. And I asked this as person, I said, hey, this is far different than before, correct? Like, I'm not making this up, that this is a new element to what the team is doing. And the person said, yeah, there were times where only 2 people were on staff running this department, and now we have 6. And so I think just we heard Zach Woodfin talk on Thursday last week about all the different, analytics and hamstring balance and all this other stuff, but just watching him actually physically work with the players in a way more hands-on way to open up practice was just one observation to start. And people in the building are like, yeah, this is new. This is very new.
So did and maybe I just never thought about it because nobody ever talks about the stretching portion unless like, oh, so and so's not here and stuff. Was I guess the guy that he replaced was it Piriano or whatever? Did he lead stretches or did one of his lackeys do it?
So I don't. That's why I asked somebody because I don't remember. Because again, to your point, like who pays attention to fucking stretching? And so that's why I asked. I said this doesn't seem the same as the last regime, right? And they were like, no, this is totally different. So it does feel like there's a bit more of an organizational structure around this part of the team, which is dietary, strength and conditioning, nutrition, injury management, et cetera, et cetera. It seems like there's more structure there, more size and scope, and then there's more hands-on. Now, that to be fair, I'll be interested to see if that's the case with the adults, with the real team when the real team comes in camp opens in July. They've already said, hey, we're going to have to work with these guys who already have their own individualized plans in the offseason. This was, I think, more of rookie orientation kind of behavior, if that makes sense.
Well, it kind of ties into, right, the stuff that Brian Callahan talked about on the presser on Tuesday or Wednesday of last week, where he was talking about easing them in, making sure that they kind of they started learning the ropes, right? It's a lot more less of, hey, you're a man now. Welcome to the NFL. Just do as I say and you'll be fine. And this is a lot more kind of like, okay, we're going to ease you into the NFL process. We understand that you're not ready. Here's how practice typically runs. It's your first day. Here's the flow, the schedule, what to expect. And I think it's really interesting with Woodfin that he seems to be pretty front and center, which is that it's in and of itself, despite what was going on, maybe in stretching portions or whatever, in and of itself, him being a vocal presence enough to where people are commenting about him being available to talk to the media is just another, neon green sign that says, hey, we are doing things way differently. And this is not just a knock on Vrabel. This is something I feel like that is way differently than all the way back to Jeff Fisher. This seems like an entire, and of course, obviously, Jeff Fisher, Ken Wisenhunt, Mike Munchak, those are like decades ago, at this point. But it is still new for the Tennessee Titans, who have been 25 years behind every other franchise. So it's just a refreshing change of pace. There's other stuff that we could talk about that we are going to talk about, but there's a lot of tangible evidence that is this team is just going to run and function differently than what we've ever seen before.
Yep.
Does that yield the same, worse, or better results? We'll see. But at least we don't have the complaint or don't have they're just doing the same old thing. And I feel like this is just one of the main examples from rookie mini camp that shows that this isn't going to be the same old thing, despite what people may think.
I'm going to I was going to go sort of chronologically here through the practice with observations, but I want to, because the very next thing I noticed was a Jaquan Jackson moment, but I want to use that to sort of segue into players a little bit later on. One quick observation is Brian Callahan is just not the same presence at practice that Mike Vrabel is. Now, I don't know if that's just personality. Like, I always thought Vrabel was hilarious, like that you could hear the giant F-bombs across the field. And like, it's just, he's a bigger than life guy, literally, physically, coaching, whatever. And Brian just doesn't, like, you have to like look. You'd be like, where is he? What group is he with? Where's he at? It's just hard to find him. And so that's just a small difference, but that's all kind of baked into their two personalities. Obviously, we've already had a lot of conversations with other folks. And I know Easton's in the comments here, but Easton talked a lot about this as well. And most folks have talked about this. But just watching, so I immediately kind of walked over. Everybody headed over to watch the defensive and the offensive lines who were kind of next to each other. And, this is not revolutionary here. This is master of the obvious stuff because he is a former head coach and good enough to be an NFL head coach. But Bill Callahan's, my first thought is I walked over to the area and I looked at TD and I was like, literally all of this equipment is new, right? Like, is there a single piece of equipment here? There's probably 15 or 20 pieces of equipment out there for offensive and defensive linemen. And I said, is there a single thing that's out here that you can say was here before? And we kind of looked around for a second and he was like, I don't think so. And I was like, this is all the stuff he's designed, right? And he goes, yeah. So it's it is all his stuff, but the real takeaway is it's all new, number one, and number two, which to be expected, but number two, it's just so much fun to watch him like work on hand placement, to teach balance, to teach how to use this equipment, to see him like how direct he is with the communication style to the players. Hey, great rep. Hey, bad rep. Like, hey, get back in there. It's just, hey, get your hands down lower, JC. Like, it's just ball. And partly I just enjoy that nerdy stuff. And so it's just fun to sit there and watch him work because this is like a guy who's been brewing beer for like 50 years. It's like, nope, the hops have been in there too long. And he's just a craftsman, and it's super fun and super interesting to watch him like really get into the weeds on how to play the position and to use all this equipment that he's created. It was just a lot of fun. And I just thoroughly enjoy watching him communicate with JC Latham and the other guys.
Well, it's funny because I don't know if it was a Freudian slip by Kayla, but she says here's like a clip of Bill Callahan actually teaching, and she used the phrase actually teaching. It may have been actually coaching, but she used the phrase actually, which just
people took it the wrong way. Yeah.
Well, it's the right way to take it because there is an actual offensive line coach now. I mean, they didn't have one last year.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Say what you want about you can say what you want about Keith Carter. He had ups and downs, but he carried over his bad practice habits and alienating players up to the Jets. So, I do think that I look at it this way. I love that Brian's dad is living up to the billing of what he is supposed to be. And you guys are seeing what makes him a long tenured, well-respected offensive line coach. I don't know if you read it today, but Justin Mello has an interview out today over at BroadwaySportsMedia.com where he's interviewing the offensive line coach at IMG that worked with JC Latham, that helped him transition from defense to offense and all that kind of stuff. And he said that because he's got a little bit of experience dealing with he's been to a bunch of Bill Callahan, summits. And he knows a lot about Bill Callahan. They missed each other when he was a player, the coach was, and Bill Callahan, Brian's dad, was coming to, I think, Dallas at the time, or maybe Philadelphia, but they just missed each other. And he says that there's nobody, like if I could handpick this is pretty much what he said. If I could handpick the coach to take JC Latham, right, and turn him into the next great offensive lineman, it is Bill Callahan. And think of the last time that you saw bad offensive line play and Bill Callahan, right? Think of the last time you heard a bad offensive lineman and Bill Callahan. And to me, I mean, this respect, these stories, these words that you hear, these things that he's doing, the stuff that he is building and designing and all this stuff, right? We've heard all of these great things. And there are still people who underestimate what he is able to do with even the most base, bad offensive linemen. And the more that we hear, the more that we see, and I'm going to be so interested and tuned in to what you guys see at training camp and all that kind of stuff with the right side of the line, NPF in particular. I don't know. Like we said, if you can take a bad player and turn him average, that is so much better for this offensive line. And that's been the key issue. But the stuff that you're seeing that he's done with the rookies that you guys got to see firsthand, that we saw on secondhand on Twitter and Facebook and all this stuff, it's tangible evidence of what everybody is saying and why everybody's been so excited and demanding and wanting Brian Callahan to hire to begin with. So you get Bill Callahan, and I'm in. Like I'm bought into this offensive line, no matter who is playing in at right tackle. I'm bought in on this offensive line, knowing that the way that he teaches is going to be so simple for the offensive lineman to understand, and it's going to be effective.
I tend to agree. I also think it's important to just acknowledge, because there's like JC Latham, and we're going to get to this in a minute, but JC Latham, one of the first drills he ever did as a professional was like terrible. He was terrible. But like, let's not overreact to any of this stuff because they are children learning to become adult professionals, not children, but like young adults learning to become adult professionals. And my expectations, we shouldn't overreact to Bill Callahan either, because my expectations are I want to see a guy who looks and carries himself like he was worthy of being a head coach and knows exactly what he's doing and is good enough to invent new equipment to coach the thing that he's being paid to coach, and to have control of everything, sort of be in command. And I saw all that stuff. So it was all it did was confirm all the stuff that, to your point, we kind of already know. But it doesn't mean it was less fun. Like, it was just enjoyable to watch. It's no different than watching like a great musician or, you know, somebody that is very good at something and kind of just execute it. And you heard Latham talk about it after practice. He was like, man, I love the guy. He's great. Like, if it's a bad rep, I do the bad thing. If it's a good rep, he'll tell you, like, all right. It's great. And so that was one of the main observations. And not every coach has his gravitas. You know, like I don't think Tracy Rocker has the same gravitas that Bill Callahan does. Like, he just doesn't. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, Tracy Rocker's never been a head coach in the NFL. So let's go special teams real quickly here, because that was actually the first thing I saw. The very first drill that Jaquan Jackson did, the very first drill as a professional
punt.
As a professional athlete, was catching punts. And he was back there with, hang on. The other one is not going to be on the team. He was back there with Sam Schnee catching punts. And so what I was talking with a couple of guys when we walked by was how much work they were doing with him on how to catch the punts. And I believe Kyle Phillips had said when Craig Aukerman was sort of let go, and I don't know if he said this publicly or if this was sort of like just scuttlebutt around the facility, that like Aukerman did not teach them how to catch punts. Now, before you go crazy, I can understand why like a person doesn't need to be taught catch the football. I could see that. But also, if there are some techniques, some things that you can help you like put yourself into a better position to make the correct play or decision, that would be great. But I thought it was interesting on twofold. One, they had somebody working very specifically on how to position your body, catch the punt, work on catching punts. But also that the very first thing that Jackson did, they all broke up the team broke up after stretching to go into position groups. Jackson went to return punts right away. First thing he did as a professional for the Tennessee Titans was work on punt return. So that was just an observation from walking around kind of during the first few minutes of practice. So there you go.
So they actually had a special teams coach. Much like not having an offensive line coach, they have not had a special teams coach.
Yeah, same thing.
I think you do have to learn. I think punting in the NFL or returning punts in the NFL is wildly harder than catching punts in the NCAA.
I agree.
I think your punters are more skilled. They have more control of the ball, the angles, and all that velocity and all that kind of stuff. So I do think that you kind of do need to teach people, even if they returned punts in college, because Kyle Phillips did, how to do it in the NFL. And I think that if you can't do that or refuse to do that, either or, you shouldn't have been employed for 6 years by the same organization. Thank God he is gone. And I am so glad they got a guy that learned from like the Bill Callahan of special teams coaches, the Bengals, and his name escapes me, but the
Brian's dad. Yeah.
Yeah, Brian. No. Maybe Brian's uncle. I don't know. I don't know if it's a third Callahan out there, but the special teams coach over at the Bengals, is a well-respected. I mean, probably only Dave Taub is probably the more respected guy currently coaching the NFL at special teams than the Bengals head coach. And again, I can't remember his name, but it's the reason why I wanted Colt here and thought that he would be a good ad, as even though he's young and kind of only been doing this for 4 or 5 years, he at least learned how to be a coach. Whereas Dingleberry, Craig Aukerman, I mean, that guy couldn't coach anything. I mean, it was ridiculous. And they relied on, having excellent punters to get them through special teams. Like the only reason their special teams was ever ranked as high as it was, which would be like in the 20s at best, is because of the punting. It carried them. I mean, when you go from Brett Kern to
Ryan Stonehouse,
Ryan Stonehouse, that's the biggest to me. Like that carries your whole thing. And so I don't
Well,
know.
and
Like, I hope that Jaquan Jackson learns how to do it and doesn't muff punts. But I'm interested to see who else they try out there.
It was just those two, and I don't Schnee, the other guy. Again, one of the things
They'll add more, I assume.
Sure.
Because I know they
one
tried.
One of the things, just as an adult now with like kids and stuff, one of the things that really hits you when you walk out to rookie camp specifically is just the sheer number of people out there that have no chance to get a job. Like, it's just so like you kind of walk out there and you're like, oh my God, there's 50 people here. That's an entire college roster. And like 5 of them are going to make the team, maybe 7, maybe 2 more get a scout team. Like, it's just so, it's kind of sad, and not like in a bad way, but I just like feel bad for so many of those guys that are out there really busting their ass to try to earn a spot. And like, they know that the chances are there's 7 draft picks that all have a leg up on the rest of them. And maybe if you're lucky, you're one of 3 guys that gets on the scout team. It's just a really, really tough situation. But there were only 2 guys working on punts. I don't think Jackson dropped one from what I remember. Don't quote me on that, but I don't think he did. And again, my thought was on catching, and I think the same thing for receivers and running backs or whatever. Like, Derrick Henry had this problem. Like, my initial thought is like, you just have an ability to catch or not. At some point, the ball gets close to you, and you can be taught all the right fundamentals to put yourself in the right position to run back and then square up and like do all the stuff you're supposed to. And that's really good to have a good coach to teach you all that stuff. But eventually, you either you have good hands or you don't, like great hands or you don't. And I always thought like, well, I don't know how much you can teach of that part of the process. And so I guess ultimately it's more about all the preparation for the catch they were working on. But anyway, I don't think he dropped one. So that's all there is to that. I think that's other than that, it's, it's just one day. It's just one rookie camp, just a couple of days of practice. Hard to really make any big sweeping statements other than really fun to watch Bill see. Brian Callahan is not as vocal and is not as front and center, but again, it's just rookie camp. Stretching was very, very different. The staff is much bigger in that department and really, really working on special team stuff. So that's kind of my takeaway before we get into the players. All right.
What about I mean, you don't want to talk about any Tavondre Sweat or anything like that?
I want to get to the players. So I've got one major takeaway from the vast majority of it. I watched mostly Sweat and Latham. But Sinkers Beverages, Kingston Group, of course, are 2 great sponsors. So make sure you support those 2 local businesses. This product is free for you, for all of you, because Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group make it free for all of you. So go please support them. And remember those 2 names when you are shopping for booze or a home remodel, as one does on Mondays. Okay. So first up, JC Latham. Number 1 take. So again, the fact that he had a terrible first drill as a professional athlete is sort of proof of like what Brian Callahan said to us on Thursday of last week, which is they are not ready to be athletes yet. They're not ready. Let's lower expectations. So I saw it, and I heard everybody in the media being like, like if I would have posted JC Latham terrible in first drill, stumbled, had to redo it, fell backwards, people would lose their minds and take it the wrong way. And he had a great rest of the practice. But like, it's just an example of what Brian Callahan was trying to warn us about and what we all should do. And why Mike Vrabel could have handled maybe Traylon Burks a little bit differently from like a PR standpoint. But Latham is just, the one takeaway from Latham is just like that he was born with bones that are larger than everyone else's. Like, just the sheer, like everyone else's legs looked like a different species. like the size of the legs and the arms and the torso, and he carries it extremely well. He does not look like a big boy. He is thick everywhere. And you can tell he's their number 1 pick. And that dude, one video I shot had him lined up in the right lane, and people were like, oh, why isn't he in the left side? I'm like, because it doesn't matter. It's a fucking footwork drill. It doesn't matter. So stop reacting like it matters. But the takeaway is the dude looks the part and is he's impressive. He is very impressive. And that's what I expected. So.
Well, he has the mentality too, right? I mean, his press conference after practice, even discussing Brian's dad's sled, was impressive to me. Just as impressive as watching him move a 380-pound dummy on the second try. And it's talking about the technique, talking about how how he didn't really know how it was he was supposed to approach it. So it's kind of like Bill Callahan was kind of keeping it a secret to use as a teaching moment, which makes perfect sense. Why give them the answer to the test before actually putting them through? And then it's kind of like you're getting a foundation for what you have to work on, because they're trying to attack it like a normal dummy when it's not a normal dummy. So now, because everybody could do that, right? Everybody can attack the normal dummy. I mean, that's why they have to put, coaches on the sleds to make them at least a little bit heavier. And this, you don't have to. And he uses it as a teaching moment to say, okay, well, here's what I know I need to fix on JC Latham. And this is why we are fixing this, JC. And it got translated to JC Latham. He put it into practice, and that seems to be a big theme, right? Like the big theme is taking what you learn in the classroom or taking what you're taught and putting it out in the field. And then the next rep, JC Latham got his on that sled. And, I'm just thoroughly, it's going to be really hard for me to temper expectations. I can tell as the longer this goes on and the longer that we see really good coaching, right? And like that's the thing that's going to be, it's going to be really hard to temper those expectations. And that's something we're going to talk about later in the show here just shortly. But like, I look at JC Latham, I hear the reports, I watch the interview. Right. Okay. Hold on. I read the interview with his high school coach. Or sorry, the offensive line coach from high school. I've now watched and heard and read. There's a couple different things that the MCA boys have put together. So Mello interviewed the head coach down there at IMG, Kevin Wright, and then they also did a video breaking down some film from the Alabama-Georgia game with Kevin Wright that's out on YouTube here on the 440 Sports Network, or at least it should be, I would assume.
I think it's on the Music City Audible page.
Yeah.
But you should go check it out.
Is that separate? Gotcha. Yep. I didn't know if it's separate or not. But either way, it is on the Music City Audible.
It's a Canadian webpage,
I get it. So now you got this guy with Bill Callahan, and everybody's talking about the pedigree, the work ethic. You hear JC Latham speak, you hear him talk, you hear him explain things. You're just like, and not to put these expectations on him, but when you're also picked, as high as you are at the 7th overall pick, and you have all these people talking about big things, and you have Brian Callahan, the experience he has with turning people all pro, and it may not happen year one or anything, but there should be no reason that JC Latham is not an all pro if his career is not derailed by injuries. Like that's what you got to watch out for. And he has it all. He has the size, the physique, the strength, the power, the will, the knowledge, everything you want. And I don't like putting an expectation like that on a rookie. But I don't see any reason why at some point throughout his career he's not at least a one-time first-team All-Pro.
So I don't know. I'll start with expectations for this year, and that is I think he should start all 17 games. But barring an injury, he should be your starting left tackle for all 17 games. And you're going to live with a couple of bad.
He should be either your first or second best offensive lineman in theory.
Maybe, yeah. I mean,
Cushenberry should be first, I would expect if I were betting, but it should be pretty close.
I would expect here. It's sort of like Will Levis to some degree, and as the season goes along, at some point, JC Latham should become the best offensive lineman on the team. And I would argue Skoronski should be passing Cushenberry at some point as well. They're both pedigree players drafted very highly. They should both be good. So I don't think it's crazy from an expect. Now, I think there are clearly going to be learning pains and growing pains and games where they go up against someone who just beats you because the other guy gets paid millions of dollars to be a great athlete too. And so I think there's going to be plenty of moments where we just go, oh, that wasn't good. That didn't look good. That was a problem. Or, hey, we got to work on that. But is should he be the starting like this is not, oh, let's see if Andre Dillard can do it. Oh, let's see if it's no. JC Latham is your starting left tackle for 17 games unless something happens to his body physically. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. That's my expectation for him. I don't know what that means from like a quality standpoint, but this, just like Will Levis, is about learning and growing and gaining experience and becoming a better player so that by the time 2025 rolls around, all these guys are locked in as like upper tier players at their positions across the NFL. That's what Skoronski's goal should be.
With Bill Callahan, it's like that learning is accelerated, I feel
Yep,
like. And
I agree.
and I also feel like he's going to be putting in the work, and we already seen that he's putting into the work there. You know, what we have seen that he's already been working on the left side and we also know that they kind of do it at Alabama, kind of flip around and everything. But I do think he's putting in a lot of work, and I do think that I think that a proper expectation is that he'll probably, because I mean it's gonna be hard to unseat Lloyd Cushenberry. If he unseats Lloyd Cushenberry, man,
Yep.
you're on cruise control. You're doing good. But I do think that he's going to be the probably end up being the second best offensive lineman on this team.
So Easton says setting his rookie expectations higher than year 2 post-surgery Peter. Can't say I agree there. So here's what those little those things you go to, like those little races that happen at baseball games, or where like you see like
the sausage run.
Yeah. And you know how like they all like kind of run like this, like I could, it should start as Lloyd Cushenberry in the lead for the vast majority of, let's say, the first half of the season, if not more. Skoronski should start ahead of JC Latham, and they should both close the gap on Lloyd Cushenberry, and all three of them should be somewhere in the same ballpark by the end of the year. And if the give or take is like, hey, maybe Skoronski's better, Latham's number 2, Cush is 3, Cush is 1, but Latham and Skoronski are basically just as good, like whatever it might look like, they should gain ground and become better. And if Skoronski ends up slightly better than JC Latham, I'm not surprised by that. He's got an extra year of experience. But I think JC Latham has more ability. I think he has more talent. And so I think it's
100%.
I think it's okay to set the bar higher for his potential than it is for Skoronski's. That's all I'm saying, Easton, when it comes to that. So that's the offensive side. Now, the way Latham carries his weight is very different than T'Vondre Sweat. It just is. Like T'Vondre Sweat's a bigger dude, but he doesn't carry it the same way. Latham he carries it very easily. I don't know if his bones are like, if somebody has studied the size of his leg bones and his femur, I don't know. T'Vondre Sweat doesn't carry it the same way. It's a little bit less power, it appears. And the one thing, and we don't have to rehash any of the stuff that we need to talk about with T'Vondre Sweat, which is management and adult problems and all this other stuff. It's all just like normal stuff we've talked about. But the one thing that you could tell Rocker and other coaches were working on with him every second of every drill was finish the drill. Every single rep was, come on, finish. It was all about pushing through that last like 5 or 10 or 15% of the drill to get to the final thing the coach wanted you to do, right? Like and that's just going to be a thing he's got to work on, that he's going to have to deal with sort of his whole career, is like the stamina of being able to finish every time. And that was just sort of the thing I noticed. Otherwise, he's a fucking beast. I think there's a couple other guys that are clearly more quick-footed than him, but not at his size. And so I can't wait for pads in July where you get to see Skoronski and Sweat go head to head, or Cushenberry and Sweat go head to head, because I want to see who wins the battle. So
I liked what I saw from T'Vondre Sweat. I will say something that's probably going to be a little unpopular. And I am going to say that I think that everybody in his first of media availability that wasn't over the phone, I think everybody went a little too overboard with asking everything about weight and food. And I get that's a big thing, but this is also at some point you're not getting the answers you want, and you need to pivot to more informative questions. And I think that a couple people were trying to have fun, like, you're eating healthier, like what's a good healthy food. I don't mind that kind of a pivot, but it just seemed like everything was all about that. And there's stuff that we could be talking about, power, finesse, some mechanics and stuff like that, especially because you're not getting the answers, right? Like, I get that you have to. There's like, I feel like the threshold of asking questions about the weight were passed. Like you get like 4 or 5, and felt like it was all of them were about it. And so that may be a little unpopular, and I don't mind. I don't care if I'm a little unpopular. Who gives a shit? But I will say that, man, he kind of like JC Latham. They lived up to the hype, the billing, right? I mean, you're talking about a guy that's super fast for his size, nimble, agile, like you said. it will be interesting to see where the weight's supposed to be. It looks like the sheet you all got with their names on them were mostly pro day combine numbers. I don't think they were like recent weigh-in numbers.
6'4", 366 is what he was listed at.
Yeah, which was his combine or pro day weigh-in,
Yeah.
and maybe his combine weigh-in, but it was one of those. But I checked a couple of them. It's like none of these kids lost or gained weight since their pro day. So I think we kind of know that's probably not right. So I would have been interesting to see everybody's weight actually what it is and everything not just Tavondre, but it'd be nice to see what JC Latham was, what Jalen Harrell has, what he was able to put on. There's a couple different guys like that. But I do think he lived up to the billing, right? Like you see the vision of Tavondre Sweat.
It's a big dude.
You see why they had him so high on the board. You see why that other people would have taken him in the second round and he wouldn't have fallen. You see why. I mean, again, first glance, right? Because I guess it's a big break between now and the next time you guys see him is June.
Or no, I think I want to say it's like 3 weeks from now or 4 weeks from. Yeah, I mean, so yes, there's a little bit of a break, but yeah.
So now, what does he look like when he comes back from that break, right?
Yep.
So I'm super interested. I'll always probably be interested in what Tavondre Sweat is doing. That's probably going to be the most talked about player out of this entire draft class throughout the first year, for good or bad. But you had a good Tavondre Sweat thread. And he seems to really take to Tracy Rocker, who seems to remind him of other coaches. So all in all, I mean, you got to say that the first 2 picks, you only had 2 picks in the top 100.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty damn good start.
So we'll set expectations for Sweat in a second here, but PK chiming in. Braden upset with the way we described Latham's first read. I'm upset at the way he's talking as if he's never seen a big man on a football field ever before again. First of all, PK upset about something? No way. And taking my words out of context? I am shocked by this. No, what I'm saying, first of all, I'm not upset with how anyone described his first rep because I didn't see that shit. I'm just saying I could see myself going like, oh, this was terrible. People are going to overreact to this. And it doesn't. Brian Callahan said on Thursday, don't overreact to this. And it's probably because it's the right strategy. It doesn't mean it wasn't a bad rep. It was. And there are differences. There are certain times where you see players in personal settings. There's a couple different names that come to mind. I saw Derrick Henry on the field at the Sugar Bowl when I was covering Ohio State and Alabama. He was, I believe, a sophomore in 2014, I think. Correct? I think. But this was like an 18 or 19-year-old. And this is on the same like Sugar Bowl field during media days as Ezekiel Elliott, Joey Bosa, fucking Michael Thomas, Quinn and Willie, like NFL players everywhere on these 2 teams. And I remember standing next to Derrick Henry and having a quick conversation and just being like, that is different. That's different. And every now and then you stand next to someone. I've been on football fields most of my career too, PK. And every now and then you stand next to somebody or close to somebody and you go, oh, that one just looks a little different. Vita Vea is another one that I remember when Tampa practiced here a couple of years ago. Or was it? I don't even remember when it was. Was it last year?
Yeah, it was about 3 years ago, I think.
I remember standing next to him when he walked out, and I was just like, holy shit. Like, that's a different size human than other people. All these guys are massive, but that's different. That's a different type of body, right? And JC Latham is just a little different. He's just especially, yeah, exactly. He's especially big. He's a special, like, and again, it's different when you see these kids when they're very young. Like, and I keep saying kids, and I should not. I should say, rookies, or, in Derrick Henry's case, it was a college athlete. A college athlete was standing next to like 12 other NFL players at 19 years old, and I was like, man, that's something I haven't seen before. So that's all.
Hell, he still stands next to NFL players, and you marvel at it. I mean,
but that's why
TV was telling a story about Torrey Holt. Derrick Henry walked by Torrey Holt of all people, and Torrey Holt just like stopped him mid sentence because, damn, like,
yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a guy that's seen all kinds of different players. So I mean, I'm not surprised. I mean, what wasn't it JC Latham that everybody, including Paul, shook their hand and put out a picture of them shaking JC Latham's hand after his introductory press conference?
I mean, Skoronski didn't.
People were very impressed.
Skoronski, that's not the vibe you got last year at now. It'll be more interesting to see when he's up against professionals.
Let me say this about Skoronski: he put some meat on them bones. He's gotten thick. It'll be 3 C's picks.
It'll be far more interesting when they are all in with the professionals. These are all rookies, most of whom have no chance to make a roster. So that it's easier to see the difference when it's rookie camp. When you get to the
Kevin
real thing,
Dickerson, meeting him in person was one for me. Like I met him and Jason Jones in person, and those two dudes were like, "Whoa,
yeah.
like holy crap."
Now expectation for Sweat is interesting to me. I have a real hard time. Like you drafted him in a spot where he needs to be a starter. Full stop right there. You drafted him probably in a spot where you need him to play a vast majority of downs. This is I have a tough this one. I see JC Latham living up to expectations potentially. I think there are questions about if Cedric Gray can live up to expectations because you're putting a lot on a young player who's not even drafted in the top 100. I think with Sweat, you're telling everybody with where you picked him that this is a guy who needs to play more than 2 downs and needs to start every game. Like this has to be a starting football player next to Jeffrey Simmons the entire course of the season. And all those questions we have, which are fair, and all the questions the media asked of him, well, sometimes maybe it could cross the line into like, all right, enough. I understand that that's the thing we're going to talk about with him. That's the thing the fans are going to talk about with him. And so he has to be the one to prove those things wrong. And he has to be the one to come out and practice and show us what he is and show the coaches what he is. And so I do think it's start every game, barring an injury, same expectation. I have a tougher time sort of pinpointing what exactly he's supposed to be outside of at least a 2-down stud. I think you need more out of that if you're taking him at 38 overall.
Yeah, I mean, how are you using 2 down there? He's only going to play first and second downs, or you view that as a run-stopping nose tackle?
I guess you're right. If it's like 3rd and 15, I don't know. Where do you fall on that?
Oh, I think he's a 3-down player, so I don't fall on it. But I think that does require clarification because I think he's and when I say 3-down player, that's kind of a catch-all, and I've explained this a few different times on Stacking the Inbox. Is like he can be in on passing downs, right? Like that is the thing to me is that he can be in on passing downs. He is a pass rusher. He can be a pass rushing defensive lineman. He is not a run-stopping nose tackle, beefy boy like Teair Tart. He's nothing like Teair Tart in my mind, other than he's a big boy and he may play the same position next to his name.
Right.
He is nothing like Teair Tart, and so I see the chef friend put that up there as when I'm talking about it, but that's not what prompted me to say that. It was this idea that he's only a nose tackle that could do it. I mean, he could be a guy that could play. Listen, he may not start every game, and that may be because they may put in some weird package if they're playing the Miami Dolphins because the Miami Dolphins go like 5 wide or something.
Yeah. And I'm not talking about that.
You're only technically starting a game if you are on the field for that your unit's first thing.
And when I say that, I mean like you are the starter at your position.
Right. And he will be the starter at his position barring injury. And because I don't think that Sebastian Joseph Day is going to start over him. I mean, it may be a situation where they kind of like do it at the beginning to kind of get everybody's feet wet on this, and maybe they trust him from a more veteran standpoint than it is a skill standpoint to be able to do the plays or whatever. But I really don't think that's going to be the case. I think they love Tavondre Sweat. So I look at it as with him, I view that he's going to play an average amount of snaps that typical nose tackles do their rookie year, which was like, it wasn't in a crazy high amount. I don't even think it reached 60 something %. I'd have to go back and look to see if I have, I think I actually do have it. I do. It was 38.9 snaps, right? So like guys like Chris Jones, Aaron Donald, Christian Wilkins, Jaron Reed, Derek Brown, Quinnen Williams, Raekwon Davis, Forrest Buckner, Daron Payne, Dexter Lawrence, Leonard Williams, Javon Kinlaw, Christian Barmore, Jonathan Allen, Vita Vey, Kenny Clark, Dalvin Tomlinson, Ed Oliver, Eric Armstead, Jordan Phillips. They averaged in their rookie year 38.9 snaps a game. And I think that's a likely scenario. And I think that will be what he will do this year. I think it will be around it. Maybe it's 40. In some games it may be 55. Some games it may be 36.
I think 40
will hover around that.
I think 40 is fine. In fact, I would argue Chris Jones's snaps have maybe gone down over his career because he only he starts to show up in the second half of games and in the playoffs, and he sort of manages his own workload. This is ultimately, I think my issue is, and again, it's one practice, so I'm not using anything I saw at practice to say this. Yeah. I just think that his storyline is very difficult to it's more questions than it is sort of proven or known commodities. Whereas I think Latham is far more clear. Like, dude, you're the starting left tackle every game, done, and you should be out there for probably 100% of the snaps if you're healthy. Like, that's it. And I think with this, it's more. I think it's a little bit more moldable, a little bit more work in progress, and that's to be expected with the 38th pick versus the 7th pick, and that's just the way it is. But I do think he has to be a starter. Like. He has to be a major piece of your defensive line moving forward. Now, Cedric Gray, I thought really smart answers. I thought looked the part of sort of he's a little undersized, not like David Long undersized or Jayon Brown undersized, but he's a little undersized. And I got a chance to watch him and Williams a little bit. I did not get a chance to see, just for the record, I did not get a chance to see Dylan Johnson or Jarvis Brownlee much at all. I was focused on the big fellas, rightly so. But I did watch the linebackers, which were a little harder to watch in individual drills because they were kind of in the middle of the field. But I kind of worked my way around. And Williams, I think you wrote about this a little bit. He does feel a little, and I'll kind of package him here together. Williams does, like, he's super rangy, super lengthy as expected. But I think like the drop the hips and like quick twitch movements in space, like he's a little, I think he's still kind of getting his feet under him, a little awkward at times, but like otherwise pretty athletic. Cedric Gray doesn't have a lot of that wasted movement. It feels like he can plant and go pretty fast, which is to be expected from a guy that they want to play there. I saw some clips and I saw some drills where they're doing some interesting stuff with agility and hand-eye coordination, and like it was just kind of interesting. But I think the more interesting stuff from Cedric Gray is more about the questions after the practice and what the coaches said about him, which is, look, we're throwing everything we can at this kid because he's got to be a starter. Like, he needs to be a starter at this point. Yep. And so they've got to throw as much as they can at him, and he's got to take it all in. It's on him to sort of digest it all and then be able to call the plays. He was calling he would call the play, but Tavondre Sweat would kind of call the huddle, I guess, which is kind of interesting. But then he was lining people up, right? Like, so he's got to be able to do all that stuff. So I think his head's swimming right now, but I think they're doing that on purpose. They're throwing a bunch of shit at him because he's got to learn how to swim quickly. Right.
I mean, I wrote about talking about James Williams, which is the article is out today, and Cedric Gray was the article I had out Wednesday, is that there's nobody that has more pressure on them, I feel like, on this defense, right? And Tavondre Sweat has a different kind of pressure, but like the burden to be the starter in an important position is no one has a greater rookie pressure or anything on defense than Cedric Gray. Like, he has to be this guy that they are throwing him in the deep end to be, and he has to live up to the expectation because they are still so very thin at inside linebacker that if he fails or can't do it or can't live up to this burden that has been placed on him, then you got Jack Gibby behind you. And now listen, that's not good. So that's kind of where you're at with Cedric Gray. Is like, I'm encouraged by everything that he said, and I don't expect that it's going to be perfect right out of the gate. But the more that you put this pressure on him, the more that you throw him into the deep end, the more he'll learn to swim, right? And so in my mind, this is exactly what you should be doing with Cedric Gray. I said, do not mess with this foolishness of trying to make Amani Hooker be it. Listen, there's only one safety in the entire league there's actually only one player in the entire league in defense that's not a linebacker and not the green dot play caller. That's the safety from Dallas, who's Jalen Kearse. So that he's the only guy. Everybody else is inside linebackers. I know that other people can do it. You know, I'm sure Amani Hooker can do it. But it seems to be that everybody in the NFL is letting everybody else know that if you want a green dot player, it's got to be your linebacker. And we know that Kenneth Murray can't do it. So at this point in time, it has to be Cedric Gray. And that's the position. That's what the process by the Tennessee Titans has led us to, is that Cedric Gray has to be the guy. So he has a lot of pressure to do it, a lot of burden and responsibility that he has to live up to. And he has to be the guy that starts every game, that plays almost every snap. He has to be around an 800 to 700 snap guy. You would like for him to be higher, but that's probably not realistic for a rookie. They all hit a rookie wall. I am interested, and I asked you earlier because I'm going to shift to an undrafted free agent just real quick before we get to James Williams. And I am interested to see where Khalid Duke falls in this linebacker group, because nobody watches Kansas State 2022 defense tape, I'm sure. Nobody watched all 22 of Kansas State. But Khalid Duke, back in 2022, spent the majority of his snaps, 257, as an inside linebacker. He spent 160 as the slot coverage corner for whatever reason in Kansas State. And then he spent like 157 as an edge in 2022. And his measurables, his physical traits, his athletic traits, I wonder if he's not an edge guy, if he is going to be maybe both. Maybe you'll see him go from practice to practice because of his size.
So positionless, perhaps?
Maybe he'll rotate. He may be positionless. But I kind of wonder if he's not going to be in that linebacker rotation as well. But I also talk about James Williams just real quick. I love James Williams. I love everything about his versatility. I love his attitude. I love his story. He's been through a lot. He's overcome a lot. Go read stackinginbox.com to find out more. But I said that he will be the guy that a lot of the people are going to be talking about from camp. And so far it's just Joe. But Joe's building the James Williams hype train, not to a certain, high degree or anything. But he did say that it was like you couldn't take your eyes off James Williams. He's everywhere.
He's a fun player to watch. There's no question. And as you wrote about, like, they're going to have to put him in the right positions to find success. Mm-hmm. With Cedric Gray, I find it interesting because I agree with you that if their plan is to compete this year for the division, which is not out of the question, it's not what Vegas says, but I don't think that Vegas isn't right all the time. Cedric Gray said, look, not the same system, so that he's got to learn an entirely new system. It's all about intake and then outtake, right? It's how can I take all of this in and then distribute it back out to my defense as quickly as possible. So he's just got a lot of work to do. I think if the expectation is to compete, 8-9 wins, maybe try to challenge for a division, then I think you're right. He's under the most pressure to kind of show everybody that he belongs. But I think where you drafted him, at the top of the fourth round, sure, there are plenty of guys that you can get in that area of the draft that end up going on to start at linebacker. But this is not a high-level top 50 pedigree player. And so you're almost setting expectations higher than sort of his draft status, which is a kind of a weird thing to say because eventually the draft status.
But you have to because that's what they've done. But like, I'm looking at it from the team perspective.
Sure, but and the way they addressed the linebacker in the offseason, I agree with you. That's clearly what they were planning on doing. And as we said in our immediate reaction to the draft, like this felt very orchestrated and planned to go get this player with this pick for the green dot for that position. Now, it may be too much for him. He may be a little too small or not fast enough, or just it's going to take time for the mentals to catch up. I don't know. Who knows? But I don't think the pressure for him to be in his role is greater than the pressure that for T'Vondre Sweat to be in his role. Meaning, because you took him much, much later and because it's a position that's easier to find, I think there is more pressure on, and because of Sweat's the questions around what Sweat has to do to stay good, I think there's more pressure on T'Vondre Sweat to prove that this organization made the right pick and has to be a very high-level defensive lineman. Whereas if Gray, you try him and he doesn't work, you can solve the problem easier. You can address the need easier. You can coach him up. You can give him some time to develop. It means you're probably not going to win as many games, maybe. Maybe you don't stop as many people on third down. Maybe you don't get off the field in the fourth quarter as many times as you should. But I think there's way more pressure on Sweat to be good at his job than Gray to be good at his job. If that makes sense because of how they valued the two players. Does that make sense? Like, I agree with you. Gray I think thrown out there.
I think Cedric Gray's position is more important than T'Vondre Sweat's position.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I mean,
because you have Jeffrey Simmons there, right? Like, I mean, you got Jeffrey Simmons. If you have to,
quarterbacking the defense is more important than
and also look at who's behind him versus who's behind T'Vondre Sweat. At least you have Sebastian Joseph Day. You don't have anybody behind Cedric Gray that's worth a damn to be able to do what he needs to do. And that I think that's my thing is like we're not going to see a lot of, more than likely, okay, high level impact plays from Tavondre Sweat. We're going to see you probably going to see it more on all 22 than you are going to see it live. That's the
he's going to make
position.
He's going to make all the high impact plays for Cedric Gray to make the high impact plays.
Right. You get what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
What you see Cedric Gray do is going to have more tangible in time. He's going to have more. It's going to be more tangible, but it's also going to be more noticeable. If Tavondre Sweat isn't out there for one play, you're probably not going to notice it as much as you would notice Cedric Gray out for one play.
Okay.
If Tavondre Sweat is having a rough day against like a center and a guard, it's not going to be as much as Cedric Gray, letting a tight end get past him or putting people in the wrong spot or this and that. So I get what you're saying, because that's kind of why I said at the beginning it's a different kind of pressure for Tavondre Sweat on the defense. But I feel like there's a lot of burden and responsibility. Like nobody has more burden and responsibility than Cedric Gray.
And maybe this is where we can be critical of the organization for making this decision, or maybe it was just sort of the only decision they could make at that position. But ultimately, if you look at NFL teams drafting a middle linebacker to quarterback their defense in the 4th round, and then that player starting all 17 games and being successful, that is not a statistically high probability plan. It's just not. So I think fans need to be realistic with themselves about.
I even stated that it's not. I mean, well, the 7th round linebackers that come out, like James Williams, you can't expect much from James Williams, but you can later on.
Yeah,
Cedric Gray, I don't know. I mean, you can look at some of the rookies that have came through in that round, 3rd, 4th, 5th rounds that are linebackers that have been impact players their first year. I mean, obviously San Francisco has had 2 of them, right? I mean, Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner, when you look at that. There are players that do, but it's not as high of a impact hit rate, but they were super comfortable with this pick. Like the Tennessee Titans told everybody. They said, we're okay with this rookie draft class because we're not going to really pursue too hardcore veteran linebacker to put opposite of Kenneth Murray. And we like Cedric Gray so much, we didn't even have to interview him. We didn't even contact him throughout this whole process. We like Cedric Gray that much. So the Tennessee Titans process has put, to me, a big spotlight on Cedric Gray.
I know, I completely agree with you on that. There's no whether that's fair or not is what we're going to find out.
Yeah.
Like that. Now I went back and just checked real fast because Fred Warner did start 16 games his rookie year, which I would argue is probably the exception, not the rule. Even Dre Greenlaw only started 10 games or whatever. So or 11 games. Like that. I think that, to your point, they are doing this by saying we only signed Kenneth Murray and drafted him and have already talked about Green Dot and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like they're the ones putting the pressure on him. And whether that's right, wrong, fair, unfair, again, statistically, to a fan's perspective, the probability of him being Fred Warner, it's pretty low. Like those guys.
But nobody thought Fred Warner was going to be Fred Warner.
That's true. That's absolutely true.
You kind of do have that going for you.
Yep, no question. And Rand was there for that stuff, so he knows about it. So, all right, real quickly here, I did not have a chance to watch a lot of Harrell or Brownlee. Jackson, I think the one observation.
Well, Brownlee left practice, so you missed him.
I didn't see. That's probably why I didn't see him. Jackson, I will say, Jackson looks, for as small as he kind of comes off on tape and on his measurables, he looks much bigger than Kyle Phillips from like a thickness standpoint. So I don't know if that helps with their ability. I don't know. He's been through a lot of injuries in his career, so just an observation. He looks pretty quick in the open field, though. Good hands catcher, runs really good routes. He's a guy that's, I think, he's gonna look like Kyle Phillips does in practice. Knows what he's doing, knows where to be. But they did not do a lot of team stuff that was fast. Like it was a lot of kind of slow walkthrough stuff. So I don't have a whole lot else. I was so focused on Latham and Sweat with a little bit of Gray and Williams mixed in. So if you got anything else on Williams, go for it. But I think that's kind of where I'm at right now. So.
No, I wish you would have gotten to be able to see a little bit more of Jalen Harrell. Because I really like Jalen Harrell. I love that pick. It's probably my favorite pick, surprisingly enough, 7th round pick. Just because, I think there's going to be something there to Jalen Harrell. It's going to be a process. I don't think it's going to be instant. He did play punt coverage for Michigan, so we know that he at least can do special teams and stuff like that. But I look at it and I go, that's a guy with this current iteration of the edge room That's a guy kind of like you were talking, like, you at the beginning, you have like Lloyd Cushenberry, Peter Skoronski, and JC Latham, and they're just like moving around like a horses and stuff like that.
Right.
I feel like at the end of the year, Jalen Harrell's going to be the third best edge guy, way better than Rashad Weaver and Caleb Murphy. That's
Okay.
just how I feel.
I can see that. I can see that. I will say Harrell, and actually, if you check one of the videos, Harrell was that I posted on Twitter. You can get there at Braden Gall. He does. You can see Sweat and Harrell back to back do the same drill, and I left that in the video because normally you'll cut out like other players and stuff, and I left him in the so you can actually see the size and the footwork and everything kind of just doing the same drill. So I do recommend going to watch that. He is a good looking player. Like there's no way he's not. I think very well coached. The scouting report seems accurate on him. But again, you're just like not just physically, but mentally, Latham and Sweat take up all the room. They take up all the room in your head. But I'm really excited to see Dylan Johnson in a couple of weeks. Really excited to see him. Excited to see some. I did. So Stoney says I'm still waiting on the Isaiah Eaton report. He is very undersized for the position group that he's in, but you can tell that he uses it to his advantage. Very quick, hot, quick feet, the whole deal. So there's your report on Isaiah Eaton. How about that? Eaton.
Hey, I will say this: Austin Stanley has a picture or a video of Isaiah from that practice.
There you go.
Well, go look at Austin Stanley's Twitter account.
Well, they got 3 of them out there, and their entire business model is get as many videos that go viral on Twitter as possible. I was talking with Austin about that. It's like, here, Tavondre Sweat's going to stretch. Here's Tavondre Sweat's left hamstring stretch. It's going to get 4,000 clicks. Way to go. I love Austin and Zach and the work that they do. So, all right. Sinkers Beverages, the Kingston Group, of course, are 2 main priority sponsors. They keep this show free for all of you. So we do appreciate them, but go support them. Go support good local businesses owned by good local folks doing good work in the community. Kingston Group, buildkg.com, and Sinkers Beverages in East Nashville, as well as their sister store, Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville. Stackingtheinbox.com. I'll shout out to Sobros Network as well. Check out their great work. You got Football and Other Efforts. You got Hot Read Podcast, Music City Audible, Paul Karski Podcast, all the other great stuff across the 440 Sports Network. We do appreciate all of you listening and supporting. Give us a thumbs up if you don't mind on YouTube. And, of course, subscribe and share the product on podcast apps everywhere you get your podcast. Thank you guys for listening. For Zach, I am Braden. This has been a football show.